Do you ever want to dive deeper into the Bible, but you just don't know where to begin or struggle to feel like you even have the time? When you read the Bible, do you get frustrated because you know there is so much more in there? You just have no clue how to get it out. Or maybe you just want to know the Bible better and you're looking for any resource to help. Well, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the Context and Color of the Bible podcast. We are two sisters. I'm Erica.
And I'm Veronica.
We love to study the Bible and help others understand it better. When it comes to our own study of Scripture, we have found that in bringing back the context of Scripture, it adds so much to our understanding. It actually adds color to the black and white pages of the text.
All right, so we're jumping back into chapter 2. We're on verse, what would you say? 14?
14.
Quick recap. King's had a dream, left him troubled. And so he brought in his advisors, his dream whisperers.
Dream team. Nice.
There you go. He brought in his dream team. I'm so using that in a graphic. He brought in that dream team and he said, tell me what I dreamed.
Yep.
And when they said, we can't, this is impossible, you're asking something that only can happen among the gods, and that kind of person, they don't live here. Verse 11, I'm slaughtering it. But, and he's like, well, then you're all going to die, and all your little people with you.
Yeah.
Essentially, I'm wiping off all the cadets, all the trainees, and your life is done, which sounds like an irrational, really bad decision.
Yeah, that's a good plan if you really want to get an interpretation for your dream. Let's kill everybody.
I know. How does that help? Can we have a little time more to think? I have a new idea.
Yeah.
So with that, we will be starting with verse 14.
Yep.
Okay.
Jumping right in. So, as you mentioned, also the cadets, also the trainees are on the death sentence. And we know Daniel and his friends were in the middle of their 3-year training program, which we had looked at chapter 1. So they're still in the middle of the program. Suddenly, someone's knocking on the door, and they're like, yeah. And you're like, time to die. And they're like, whoa. What's going on? I mean, I'm sure Daniel and those guys had no idea.
Right.
Like, until all of a sudden, they're getting the summons. And we see the commander of the king's guard comes out and goes to get Daniel and the friends. And then we get this interesting similarity to chapter 1. Daniel speaks to him with wisdom and tact. You remember how Daniel had to interact with the master of his training in chapter 1? He had to kind of interact and discuss over the food and drink issue. And he had to have wisdom and diplomacy to kind of negotiate, because the first answer wasn't one that he had hoped for. So then he goes down to the guy, the underling, and says, hey, let's give this another try. So he uses, God's given him much wisdom. And even here, a guard coming to say, you're going to be killed and I'm taking you. He's like, God gives him wisdom and tact even in this moment. He speaks to the king or to the officer like, well, why is the king issuing such a harsh decree? So he's asking questions. He's not freaking out. He's not panicking. And God obviously intervenes, gives favor to Daniel by the guard explaining the whole matter. And then Daniel, it says here in verse 16, Daniel went in to the king and asked for time. Most of the commentaries I read said they didn't think, I mean, Daniel's still a trainee. I don't think it's just he kicked open the throne room. It's like, hey, king, give me a little bit of time. Right. I think this is, even though it's worded this way, the proper protocol is I'm going to send a message back to the throne room and just explain, give me some time, maybe, 24 hours, and I think I can help solve this issue. So just as you're reading, I guess I would encourage you listeners, know that sometimes things are written not in a literal sense, but in this is the proper protocol sense. So that's why
Because everybody
phrases
knows
there.
you don't just walk into the king's presence
Exactly,
and say this. You all know the proper routine, the proper channels to go through.
Yes.
But it's easier just to say, rather than, well, he sent a message to so-and-so who sent the
Which
message
you don't
to
wanna
so-and-so.
read that, yeah.
You just go, he got a message to the king.
Yep.
That's what you ultimately need to know.
Yep.
But I do like your image of Daniel kicking in the doors to the throne room. Yo, dude, king. Wait a second.
Yeah. So then Daniel returns to his house and explains the matter to his friends. We met his friends in chapter 1, and they feature again in chapter 3. And he urges them to plead for mercy from God. And, that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men. Well, so it's interesting. Maybe we'll let them die, but God at least save us.
Some of them could go.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely.
Their message is wrong.
Yeah. So during the night, this mystery is revealed to Daniel in a vision. And we get the sense, I don't know if it's saying it exactly here, but we get the sense if they probably entered into like a prayer and fasting kind of initiative. We know from other snapshots, like chapter 6, Daniel gets in trouble because he's regularly praying. In chapter 9 of Daniel, he's praying and has a vision. And a big chunk of chapter 9 is about his prayer for back home. So we know, if you look at the book of Daniel in its entirety, Daniel is a man of prayer. Mm-hmm. And here he's already seeming like a young man of prayer. We know in chapter 1, he's a man of conviction who's adhering to the laws of Moses and trying to live a faithful, obedient life. So it would make sense that he and his friends probably prayer and fasting throughout the night. God, give us an answer. We need to save our lives, but also let's help this king and save all of these people. I'm sure, trying to preserve life. And they get the answer in this vision. And then if you're looking at your Bible, you see that verses 20, 21, 22, 23 are all in like a poetic writing kind of block quote. And we talked about last week that how the theme of this chapter is about who controls wisdom, who has insight and divine understanding, because that was the conflict that was emerging between the professional advisors and the king. He's looking for the wisdom. They can't truly provide it when the screws are put to them. So it's curious then to look at Daniel receives this vision and this answer, and here's his praise. Is praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises others up. That's an ominous point, knowing what we talked about last week. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. So we're getting that theme starting to emerge. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells within him. The light of understanding, the light of knowledge, and clarity. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. So how many times in there is something about wisdom, understanding, knowledge? Like how many times does that show up?
A lot.
In that prayer.
A lot.
And this is really in the center pivot point of the whole chapter, where we as readers of the Bible know that God is the only one who can bring this. But within the context of this chapter, the question was raised earlier from these magicians and enchanters, but now we get on the lips of Daniel the confirmation. Yeah, you're not going to find your divine insight from looking at the stars or trying to speak to the dead. There's only one true God that can reveal these things.
But isn't that what the king was ultimately want? I mean, in a way, that's why he had the magicians, the sorcerers, the astrologers. I want the wisdom, the understanding, the wise counsel from you. And you just go, I mean, even just how you contrast light and darkness here of you're all tapping into the darkness to get that. And Daniel's tapping into the light.
Yes.
Of just, you don't get it from people. Wisdom, counsel, understanding. It comes from God through his people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, it just feels very, you either take this one or you get that one.
Yep. And that's a theme that plays out throughout the book of Daniel. Listeners, get this. There are powers, kingdoms. That are anti-God, that could blow us away in a moment. And Daniel talks about those, especially as you get into the chapter 7 and beyond, where it's looking in beyond the veil and looking at these powers and principalities that are engaging and conflicting with God's purposes. Here in chapter 2, we're looking at the human level, and so we get like little pinpricks of that power breaking through, but there's that evil, arcane, occult powers that people can tap into. Don't advise it. You're playing with fire. But God here is showing like there's more power, greater wisdom, and the true wisdom here. I should say the true source of these powers, and that's the conflict that we're just getting the beginning hints of it here on the human sphere or level. And then, but Daniel, as the book unfolds, not the man, as the book unfolds, it like blows up into this cosmic level. And we're going to get a few more glimpses to that as we learn more about the dream and the interpretation.
Okay. Feels like one's true and one's a counterfeit.
For sure.
Yeah. You want true wisdom, knowledge, discernment? Tap into God. You want the counterfeit, which sometimes looks good and looks close, but it's not going to be as powerful or as amazing.
Yeah. And usually ends up
deadly.
Yeah. Yeah. So most likely in the morning, Daniel comes to the commander of the king's guard, who is appointed to execute him and the others, and says, "Don't execute us. Take me to the king and I'll interpret the dream." And I love this. Arioch takes Daniel and says, "I've found a man among the exiles who can tell the king what his dream means."
Promote me.
Yeah.
I'm amazing.
Yeah, there's a little bit of self promotion there. Yeah, just one of those fun little things. Just like John beating Peter to the tomb.
Yes.
tomb like,
yeah. No. Watch me write it in my book.
So, let's see. Daniel, let's see, what verse are we in?
26.
26. Yeah, so the king asks Daniel, calls him by his Babylonian name. He said, "Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it?" So those two questions come back. He hasn't changed his stance. He's still saying, "Tell me what the dream is and the interpretation." And this is an amazing verse to me in 27, because Daniel replies corroborating what the magicians and enchanters said. "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about." And I could just see at that moment Nebuchadnezzar probably starting to...
I brought you in here for that.
Yeah. This one's the first one to die.
And meanwhile, the guard over there who's taking credit going, "Oh, no."
Arioch's great mistake. It's like, you too. You're going to join him. But it's just Daniel. I mean, it's, I think, another small evidence of his wisdom and his diplomacy, his tact, because he kind of starts there, because he's acknowledging what these guys said is right. They can't explain these mysteries. And so he's a bit of kind of reaching out to defend them at one level. It's kind of a dual, like it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, he's kind of defending them, but on the other hand, he's kind of saying, these guys are impotent. You know, they're not ever going to get you the answers that you really need. And so the king's, probably about to blow a gasket, and Daniel continues, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. And maybe that was just enough to buy him enough time. And Daniel continues to launch in, and he's shown you, King Nebuchadnezzar, what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind were these. And he starts not even giving Nebuchadnezzar a chance to interject or respond. So on the one hand, he's defending, but also undercutting the magicians, the enchanters, the professional class. But then on the other hand, now bringing the focus to God and then saying, okay, here's the proof I have of what I just said. And the dream is da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So he's very skillful in his communication and in kind of his ability to, I don't want to say manipulate, but bring the conversation and the tone along so that I think Nebuchadnezzar is more receptive to what he's about to say. And we get a repetition of that theme. Who's the one that can reveal mysteries?
God.
The God who told me what I'm about to tell you. Also, to clarify, I didn't do this myself. This isn't something I made up. I'm not anything special. I'm just a conduit being used by the one true God. So he describes this dream, which, this in and of itself is a miracle that he could describe the dream even before we get to the interpretation. Your Majesty, you were lying there, and your mind turned to things to come. And the revealer of mysteries showed what's going to happen. And here's the dream. You looked, and there before you was a large statue, enormous, dazzling, awesome in its appearance. Have you ever been in front of a large figure, a large statue?
Like the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah. But
Mount Rushmore.
Have you been to Mount Rushmore? What were your feelings? What do you, as you witnessed those things?
Yeah. Eric was with me with both of those. Just, you feel small.
Yeah.
And you sit there, and to me, it's always, how did they do that? And how did they get up so high? And
did anyone fall?
Yeah. Yeah. It probably wasn't anything grandiose, more just.
But still, I think
an impressive that you could do, impressive to sit there and go, how did they figure this out? How did someone put this all together? Especially Mount Rushmore of, okay, even the Eiffel Tower, I guess, but that you can build in pieces and work up. Mount Rushmore, you're like, are you hanging on the rock wall? How?
All of those.
How do you see, and how do you see chisel here, but don't chisel there? So.
I think your feeling of being small, I think Nebuchadnezzar probably felt that way. I think maybe more with the Mount Rushmore, I think about that massive thing that you're in front of, if it was in the shape of a human form, gives it more, I don't know, it gives it a different feeling than a tower. Even as impressive as a tower could be, to be standing in front of a human image, probably brings in some divine kinds of I'm just an ant here before this. And I haven't visited the Statue of Liberty one day. That would be
Oh, I've done that too.
interesting to do. But we went in Nashville. There's a replica of the Parthenon, and there's a statue of Athena. And even that's not a huge statue, but when you're standing in there, the whole room is quiet because, I don't know, she's 40, 50 feet tall sitting. And it's just this, to have a massive human shaped figure, there's just something to be in awe of. And having this within a dream setting, which, you know, things are more ethereal and probably like, it just would have made it a very terrible and scary moment, I'm sure. And so Nebuchadnezzar seeing this statue, and he notes the head was made of gold, the chest, arms were silver, the belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and then the feet iron and partially baked clay. So it starts from the most precious metals and moves its way down to least expensive, but it also moves to like more and more stronger substances until the feet themselves, which would, I don't want to overanalyze it, but it's top heavy, very weak base. It's more expensive at the beginning and then less expensive at the bottom, perhaps becoming, you know, more glamorous and glitzy, turning to more not mundane is not the practical, more, you know, iron. It's kind of the metal of machinery and such.
It's not pretty.
Yeah, not pretty, functional. It gets things done. So that's kind of the feelings he would have gotten as he looks first, obviously, at the head and then makes his glance all the way down and then notices at the bottom. It's very fragile. It's at the base. And then this curious detail where there's also, while he was watching, this rock was cut out, but not by human hands. And it struck the statue where?
At its feet?
At its feet, at its weak spot. And then it smashed it. Like the whole thing breaks into pieces, comes crashing down. And then this wind, like this massive wind comes up and sweeps it all away. So what was once standing there and putting him in awe because he's like this ant before this giant image, destroyed by this tiny rock that comes, hits it in its weak spot, blows up to pieces. A massive wind blows it away, and nothing's there except for this little rock. And then he notices, but the rock that struck the statue then became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. And that was Nebuchadnezzar's dream. That was answering the first question that Daniel and the wise men were posed. Give me the dream and give me the interpretation. So we saw how Daniel launched straight in and he gave credit to God, and now he's backing it up with proof. Here's the dream. Here's all the elements, not something that he could have just
randomly made up.
Yeah, I'm just going to randomly put these elements into a dream, and I'm sure that's, I mean, the odds of being able to get that story correct would have been impossible. And now I bet Nebuchadnezzar was there on the edge of his seat. Okay, you've proved it. You've proved you've got the answer. So now I'm going to trust that whatever interpretation you have is that that I'm looking for.
Which would just be, in a way, I kind of wonder too if Nebuchadnezzar couldn't completely articulate his dream.
Perhaps.
You know, and that's partly maybe why. Help me. You tell me. I know what I saw, but I can't explain it.
Bits and pieces of it, the feelings. Yeah.
And maybe when it was like Daniel put it out there and put it into words, you just go, oh, that's it. You know, and now if I go, okay, you know my thought. I mean, to think somebody came to me and went, I know what you dreamed last night would be like
what?
What do you know? And what are you tapping into to know? And
yeah, what
else do you know?
Yeah.
That would be a very intimate, in a way, revelation for someone to come and go, I know this. And it'd be like, okay, I need to listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now I want to know what you're going to tell me. And then to go, okay, now I want to know what it is. What does that mean? Clearly it means something. So there's got to be an important message. Get it out. I need to, because in a way you'd want to go, I'm the gold head, because that's pretty inexpensive. But on the other hand, but I was toppled over.
What if I'm the feet?
Yeah. What if I'm the feet? I mean, there's so many.
Or what if I'm the statue?
Yeah. Or am I that rock?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or am I the statue? Yeah. I mean, so much. It would just be like, okay, thank you. You put it into words. You've taken my fears. Now explain it all.
Yeah.
So, and you just got to think the whole room went silent. As I'm assuming the other magicians, sorcerers were still kind of cowering
there,
in the corners.
maybe stunned. Yeah.
But just everyone going, oh, who is this kid?
Yeah.
Because he's young.
Yeah.
And he's not one of us. He's one of the I don't know if they call them
Exiles,
refugees, exiles. One of the people we kidnapped.
Essentially, yes.
Who is he? Where is he from?
Whose God
Mm-hmm.
is he? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or whose God does he worship?
The quiet hush, but also the ripples as everyone's starting to go, who is that kid?
Yeah.
Where'd he come from?
Yep.
How did we find him? How'd he end up in here? Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going to leave everyone.
Yep.
Come back next week for the interpretation. Do you have anything else you want to add? Nope. Erica's good again. So thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.